All right, so I'm joined here by Mark. How do you pronounce your surname, Mark?
I don't tell anybody.
I'm not even going to try it because I'll absolutely butcher it. But
My grandmother taught me to say Przekurat. That's how it's pronounced.
Oh, really?
In Polish, yeah.
And I bet nobody ever says that.
They all call me Mark. Yeah.
So, Mark, you are probably most well known in the Arborist community for running the splicing workshop Fids and Fibres. Which you've been doing for
10 years I've been doing that. Since 2008 when I went to Rich Hattier's down in Kentucky. I took the 2008 splicing symposium and I learned how to splice from Rich Hattier and Michael Taine. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then you just continued it ever since.
Yeah, so I went down, I spent 3 days with Rich and I don't know, maybe 35 people. And I learned a few things. I didn't learn much, but what I learned turned me on so much. I got so excited that I came back to Vermont or New Hampshire, and I just called up 3 or 4 of my closest friends and said, come to my house. I want to show you what I learned. It's pretty amazing. And I knew if I didn't teach it right away, I would forget it. And so that was the first Fids and Fibres. It was like 3 or 4 people around the kitchen table just saying, this is what Rich told me. This is what Michael taught me. And that's where it was born. We did that in February when no one was working because it was too snowy. And the next year we did it and there were 8 people. And the next year we did it, there were 10. The next year there were 15. And pretty soon it went from 1 day to 3 days, then 3 days to 5 days. And now it's basically 9 days of 2 days of preparation, 5 days of teaching, and 2 days of cleanup and hang out. So it's turning into like a whole splicing retreat, not just a splicing workshop.
Yeah, splicing is just a small part of it.
Truly.
Yeah.
Truly.
That's awesome how it just evolved over time like that, where it was just a couple of buddies hanging out. You were just showing your friends what you'd been shown yourself, and then you know, they tell their friends that, oh, Mark showed me this, and so you get a few more people, and now it's actually grown into something that you're almost making a bit of a business out of, or would you say that or not really?
I'd say the transition is eye-opening. Like every day I wake up and there's more to do on Fids and Fibres, and I put more and more tree customers off to the side. Like I still have tons of people calling me for tree work, but I find, I'm going to be away. I'm going to be in Denver or Ohio or Australia or Georgia or somewhere teaching, and I'll say I'll get to you when I get back. And when I get back, suddenly I have another workshop and the tree work goes undone, and more I'm teaching.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So
you run a tree company? Yeah,
I've run Renaissance Acres Tree Care for 20 years. It's a small, I'm the boss. I'm the head cook, bottle washer, welder, mechanic, sales guy, everything. But I've had as many as 5 people work for me at the same time. And I found that I'm a terrible businessman, and I pay too much, and I pay too much in insurance, and I promise too much. I couldn't really make any money. So when I say I couldn't make any money, I paid off my house. I did well, but I'm not going to make it in the world doing tree work. So the past few years I've been down to just one other guy and myself doing tree work when it's not raining, when it's not snowing, and the rest of the time I work on splicing and safety. Yeah.
Nice. So what does the other guy do while you're not there? Is he still kind of doing bits and pieces?
Yeah, so he's a guy that came to tree work later in life. His name's Joe. He's awesome. He's mostly a ground guy. I've taught him to climb a little bit, and he's super interested, but he's very ginger and tender about it. So I told him that I was going to be doing more and more work on splicing, and I would give him my customers, but I wouldn't do it until he had his own insurance. So I talked him into getting his own insurance. And when he proved that to me, then I started giving him customers so that when I'm away, my customers will call and I'll hand them over to Joe, and Joe will get it taken care of. And if it's too big, it just waits till I get home. So yeah, I feel like that has integrity, because what I preach during my safety program, which is the growth ring, or anytime I talk in front of arborists, I always say, no tree work can commence until you have insurance. And if you have employees, you have to have workers' comp. And I push that straight through, whether it's splicing or tree work. And so I felt it was super important when I was mentoring Joe how to run his own business, that he have insurance, and he followed through. So yeah, it's a pretty cool deal, really.
Yeah. So when you return home, for anybody who's listening, you're actually at my house at the moment in Vancouver, BC, where you come from Vermont, or you live in Vermont, and you're on a bit of a crazy road trip across the states doing Fids and Fibres, and then we just attended the Petzl Arborist Symposium a few weeks ago, and then after that you drove up to BC to do a Fids and Fibres, and you couldn't get much further across the continent at the moment. So
I can go stand in the ocean. That's about as far as I can get away. But yeah, no, I've been on the road since April 9th, I think, and it's May 29th. So I've been on the road almost 2 months, and I won't be home for another month. I stopped in Canton, Ohio at Endors and did a 20-person workshop. And then I stopped in Southern Colorado, and I took part in some fire mitigation meetings with people down there who were trying to take care of their pinyon pines, make sure that the town doesn't go up in flames, which was really interesting and cool because it's not anything I'm concerned with in my whole life. And I have some friends down there who I was able to sit with and learn from the Forest Service and ask a few decent questions. And it was really fun. It was an interesting time to be there. Then I met up with Melissa Levangie and Martin Penrose and yourself. And we went to Utah for the Petzl Symposium, which was off the charts.
Yeah.
That was 3 days of fun and meeting amazing people. Then I've been in BC for almost 2.5 weeks now, at Martin's place at New Greens. Taught a Fids and Fibres there, and now we've been splicing stuff and running the brake test machine, and of course visiting Samson Rope today. Stopped in at Westbur to say hello. And there's tons of people to go visit. Ryan Cafferty wants me to stop by, and I'd love to go visit Eric Forsman, the owl guy, as well as Brian Toss is right here, and Stuart Witt. So there's no shortage of people to go visit and say hello to, and Kaylee Alcorn is here. So a lot of friends all over. But when I leave here, I'll head east to northern Colorado. The guys there are putting together.
I think your microphone's
quite plugged in, so I can pick up right where I was easily.
Yeah.
I was talking about Colorado on the way back east. I've got a group of arborists who've already taken Fids and a few people who haven't taken Fids that want to get together to do an informal splicing workshop as I head back. So I'm going to do one of those in northern Colorado, one of those in Iowa, and then visit Tom Dunlap up in Minneapolis. I'm going to interview a guy who is a veteran who lost his leg, but he's an arborist now. And they've got him on a bionic leg where he can actually control his leg by thoughts.
What?
He's on a VA test trial run. And they're paying all the fees to work on this. And they've somehow connected the neurons in his brain to translate the motion in the bionic leg. And
That's
so
absolutely crazy.
Yeah, he does tree work. His name's Moret Molina. I haven't met him in person yet, but we've chatted online a few times. So I want to go and interview him and put him up on the Growth Ring blogs on YouTube. And let's see, there's one other. I'm going to stop back in Canton, Ohio again to check in on the people at Endors. And then I'm supposed to head back to New Jersey to do another Fids, but it could be too late in the season. We may not get enough signups for that one, but we'll see how it goes.
So, as far as the obviously Fids and Fibres has grown over the last 10 years, has it got to a point now? Obviously, you're on this road trip where you're going and you've got courses booked in, this state, that state. You come to Canada, you're doing one here, then you're off and you're gonna do another one, and then I know that you were talking about you've got a trip planned to like Australia to go and do Fids and Fibres, or that's in the works, and it sounds like it's kind of definitely gaining a lot of momentum. And I just think with social media nowadays, and the fact that you have quite a presence on social media, and people talk about Fids and Fibres quite a lot who are into splicing, and there's never a bad word said about Fids and Fibres course. Everybody has great things to say. It seems like social media just makes the world so small that it's enabled you to be able to run these courses and do what you love to do, and maybe put the tree work aside, which sounds like it's a good thing if you feel like you kind of weren't, in your own words, like the best businessman at running a tree company, even.
Yeah, I tend to give away, like the guys would always kind of pick on me. When you roll up to a job in the morning and the guys would be like, what are we doing? And I say, well, we're going to do that tree and that tree and that tree and that tree and that tree. Like, you promised all that today? Yeah, and then I always bite off more than I can chew to give the customer the best value. So I'm really not the best business guy that way. I'm not very good at cutting it off and saying, oh, that's actually 2 days, and charging 2 full days when I should. So that's kind of my Achilles heel, I guess, the Mr. Nice Guy. But as far as social media goes, I've only had a cell phone for 2 years. I was a holdout. I didn't have cell service at my house until about 2 years ago. And so I didn't even have one. And people were always up my butt, like, when are you going to get a cell phone? I finally got service, and I had a trip to Australia to teach Fids and Fibres in Melbourne at Tree Gear for Trevor Douglas, and one in Brisbane for the Queensland Arborist Association. And I said, well, if I go on that trip, I need a phone for photos and to be able to connect. So I finally bit the bullet, got a phone, and now I'm on social media. But I've been a part of the internet since the beginning, but I just didn't buy into social media for a long time.
Yeah.
And but you're absolutely right. If it weren't for social, my Fids and Fibres would be a tiny little thing. I'm super grateful that the people that attend the classes have such a good time, have such a meaningful time, and learn things that are valuable to them and are willing to talk about it. I see the comments online, and I'm just always so grateful that people had such a wonderful experience. And that's my goal. My goal is when I do a Fids and Fibres, I teach from 8 in the morning till 10 at night, 11 at night, midnight, 2 nights in a row, 5 nights in a row, depends on the venue. And I will just give everything I have inside out to that group for all that time, and it's super gratifying to get a positive response, because if you do something that you care about and you're giving away everything and someone says it was terrible, that's devastating, right? Yeah. So I'm super happy to get that type of feedback. And it has grown from, in my living room for the first 4, 5, 6, 7 years. And now I've been teaching all over the U.S. and Canada. Last year I taught 2 in Australia. This year it's huge. We're going to have an Asia trip planned for Japan, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Nepal. And then after I return from that 4-month trip, there's another South Pacific trip of Hawaii, Fiji with Drew Bristow, then 4 workshops in Australia, Adelaide, Canberra, Melbourne, Brisbane, and then we're going to do another one in New Zealand. So that's another 4 or 5 months trip. So in between those two, I'm hoping to do another U.S. tour, depending on what comes together. There's plenty of people who want to do one. It's just a matter of how many people really have the coordination and follow through to get 20 people ready so that it makes sense for me to come out.
Yeah. That's incredible that you traveling all over the world and you know, there's the will and the want of people to learn what you can teach them, so it's taking you know, all over the place. And so when you do your Fids and Fibres course, do you mainly run like one course that you teach everywhere because it's, you know, you're getting the same skill level of people, so you're teaching, you know, certain splices, or do you run multiple different courses that you might do one here in BC this year and then you might come back in another 8 months and do like a more advanced version so that those same people can come again and learn like more advanced splicing or like more, you know, different types of rope, and or do you, how does it work?
Well, we talk about that all the time, whether there should be because what I teach is a beginner's level course, so it's open to everyone. It's accessible to people who have never touched a fid and never torn a rope apart, and it's accessible to people who've got 30 years of experience. So Matt Otto, who's the head splicer at the Rig Loft at Mystic Seaport in Connecticut, he's rigging the Mayflower too. He rigs historic square rigging ships, doing it for 35 years. He's come to 3 Fids and Fibres. And every time he leaves, he says, I learned so much, because it's a different rope than what he's used to. Arborist lines are different than the 3 strands that he's working on, and different tools that we have that he doesn't have. And so it's accessible from the beginner all the way to the advanced person. As far as there going to be a expert level class, I think what's going to happen there is I've been working on the Fids and Fibres Qualified Splicer program, which is targeted towards splicers that work at distributors like Shelter Tree, Tree Stuff, New Greens, Endors, American Arborist Supply, where these people are splicing all day in production mode. What I'm hoping to do with the Qualified Splicer program is to create a qualification that shows that they meet a standard of safety. And that'll include documentation of their recipes, brake test results, proof of insurance, and a whole host of other pieces that fall into play. I won't go into all the details right now, but the Qualified Splicer program should be a robust qualification that a person passes, and then they would get to use the logo of Fids and Fibres Qualified Splicer on their website and on their label on the product as well. My goal is not to stand behind each product, but to stand behind the splicer, to say that that person is qualified through the program. And I'm building that with the blessing of all the rope companies, or at least the big 3 to start with. So Yale, Sampson, and Teufelberger, New England Ropes. And then I'm going to work with the Cordage Institute, which is kind of like the ANSI committee for rope companies. I'm going to try to get on that Cordage Institute board and get their blessing for it, as well as the ANSI committee. I'm going to try to get a seat on the Cordage subcommittee at the ANSI Z133.1 committee, so that there's full buy-in all across the industry from the manufacturers, you know, and from the safety boards. And then the program will be robust enough and include insurance providers for companies to use, and brake test results. And then people can be assured that when they get a splice that says FNFQ, Fids and Fibres Qualified, then that means that splice is up to spec.
That seems like definitely a huge step in the right direction as far as safety is concerned, because I suppose a question that comes up a lot, and especially in my mind, and I'm sure in a lot of other people who either can splice or whose friends can splice, is, you know, people often ask, oh, you know, who's qualified you to splice, or who's tested you, or are you certified? And the truth is, there's not really a certification as such. Is that the closest that you can come to be able to prove how well you can splice is sending out your splices to somewhere like Yale, and they break test them for you, and then they can say, you've sent off so many splices and they've come back at above the levels that they should be, but there's no real certification for splicing. And
that's an interesting question, because Yale for years has done a really cool thing where you can get certified at Yale for one rope, Yale Polydyne, 1/2 inch, and you send that. Yale will send you a piece of rope and the instructions. You splice it, and you send it back, and they break it. And if you pass, they send you a little certificate that says you're Yale certified splicer on 1/2 inch Polydyne. And that's pretty much the extent of certification available to the general public. Samson does something a little bit different, where if you're a distributor, a professional rope, splicing and sales company, and you distribute their ropes, they will give their splicers a kind of a private certification course, but that's not available to the general public. But other than that, there isn't a qualification or certification. So what you're saying is that if someone said, I want to splice, they send a bunch of stuff out to get it brake tested. Every brake test machine is slightly different, and it's voluntary. So if they say, I sent one 1/2 inch double braid, that means I can splice all double braids of every diameter. It's not exactly true. It's partially true. It's a gray area. So that's what the Fids and Fibres qualified splicing program is going to do. There's going to be a recipe for each rope from each manufacturer and each diameter, with different fid dimensions and taper patterns possibly. And then every splicer will have to send a piece of that out to have it brake tested. And that result on paper comes back and goes right behind the recipe in the file drawer and says, this person is now qualified on that rope. So if you're working in a busy splicing shop, let's say, you have a new guy, and he's not qualified on, let's say, tachyon. But tachyon's a class 1 double braid splice. And the guy who normally does that is on vacation. And you get an order, and they say, can you do that for us? Well, he's not qualified for it. You don't know whether that's going to be the perfect splice or whether he's proficient at it until he's passed that test, passed the brake test. It's in his folder. And then you know that he can do that one. And that's the type of positive proof that I want to have across the industry, that people just aren't saying, he's a splicer, just give him anything and he'll do it.
Yeah.
Because they may not have an understanding of class 1 versus class 2 fiber, or tight 24 strand versus looser rigging ropes.
So, for anybody who knows what goes into putting in place like safety protocols, that kind of thing, they know that nothing happens very quickly. So when you're talking about this idea that you've got on this program that you want to implement, like realistically, how long do you think it might take to put something like this in place?
Great question. I've been getting this question since I first leaked out that I was doing it, which is about 2 years ago. And my answer was, it'll take about 2 years. And now it's 2 years later, and I'm going, it's going to take another 2 years.
Yeah.
I think I can probably pump it out sooner than that if I don't travel so much. But you're right. It's a big undertaking, and there's a lot of conversations that have to be had with the engineers from each rope company and the marketing people from each rope company to make sure that we're adhering to their standards. Those conversations are difficult to have. You have to get in the rope company's offices. You got to get the right people together. You got to show them what they're doing, and then get their approval. So they have to go back and sit in the boardroom and talk it all out, and then come back to you and say, yes, we believe that this is a good idea, or we support it with these caveats. How many brake tests do you need? Right? So Samson might say, you need 5 brake tests in order to be qualified. Yale might say you need 2 or 7 And New England Ropes might say 4 or 6. I have no idea yet what they're going to say for when they would feel comfortable that someone's qualified. But I want to have all their inputs, and then I'll pick a number that satisfies as much of the group as possible. So just a small conversation like that takes months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that I mean, if you can pull that off, then that's going to be absolutely fantastic, because I'm not a splicer myself. I would love to be able to do it, but I know that I don't have the time, and I know what it would take to be shown and to learn from someone like yourself, and then you need to literally be practicing it over and over again so you don't forget those little techniques that you've been taught, like in the class, how to do. And so I'm quite happy that I don't know how to, well, I say happy. I would love to be able to splice, so maybe happy is not the right word, but I come to terms with the fact that I'm probably not going to be splicing anytime soon. But those things do cross my mind of, like, I know many of my friends that can splice, some who can splice really well, some who don't talk about splicing too much, but then, you know, like, you find out they can splice and they'll maybe splice things for themselves, but they don't feel comfortable splicing for others. And I just always wonder, you know, why and where are you going to feel comfortable as, say, a climber like myself, getting somebody to splice something for you. Should you just trust somebody who works for an arborist supply company? Should you trust somebody who's been splicing for 5-10 years? Should you not trust anybody and just buy it from a store and get a stitched eye because it's a machine? Like, it's a funny one. But then I suppose you see people that you've taught, and you keep in contact with a lot of people who've learned to splice from you, and some of those people, just through conversations that you've had and through them telling you what they've been splicing, you probably can just sense who's really on the game and, like, who's really meticulous about how they splice. And then you can probably tell the people that, you know, are still dabbling a little bit but aren't into it, don't have that passion for it, but are still splicing, and you maybe aren't so comfortable with those kind of people.
What you're bringing up is a real kettle of fish, no doubt. And I don't want to be the person that judges other people's splices. Of course I do, because I'm human. I'll look at a splice and go, not done well. It's not a judgment of the person, it's a judgment of the splice. However, the judge is the brake test machine. That's the final word. Does it break above spec? And if the person doesn't have proof of that, that's like not having a driver's license when you get pulled over. If you don't have proof, oh yeah, I have a driver's license, officer. Oh yeah, my splice is strong. It's the same comment. You know, so unless you have brake tests to back up what you're claiming, you don't have it. As far as should you trust splices that are just given to you, I always say during class that I actually hand somebody a piece of rope that I spliced, a hitch cord, with no label on it. I hand it to you, and I say, here, this is a gift from me to you. Would you climb on it? And then as a group, we talk about that. So what just happened? So the person says, well, yeah, Mark spliced it, so it must be good. I said, well, what if I was drunk when I spliced it and I don't have much value for it, so I'm going to give it to you for free? It doesn't mean much to me. Do you know that or not? Did I do it when I was sober? Do you know if I made it from a piece of fabric that was well manufactured? Or did I get a box of rope from a manufacturer that had defects in it, and did I just make it out of that? Do you have any idea about its history, about what it is, about what it's rated for? When I made it, you have no information at all. So I say, actually, I don't even have to say it. The person then thinks about it and goes, well, I shouldn't climb on that. I don't know anything about it. It's my life support. it's beautiful, but I don't know anything about it. And so what's the minimum? Would be a label. A label has a born on date. So you know when it was made, you know who it was made by. There's usually a company logo or name on it, which means that it should have insurance. In case it fails, then there's insurance to back it up. Will the splicer back up their splice by putting a label on it? And I've seen some splicers on the internet that sell splices with no labels. And so I think to myself about the customer, if something goes wrong with that splice and they say, well, so-and-so gave it to me or sold it to me, and the courts go, well, can you prove that? Do you have a receipt? Well, no, but, does it have a label? How do we trace it back to that guy? Well, I can't. It doesn't have a label on it. Well, then you're on the hook for the insurance. That guy's not, even though it failed, right? So there has to be a chain of evidence or a chain of command, a chain of responsibility there. And I think a label is the thing.
Yeah.
So if you're running your own company, let's say, and you have an employee who gets splices from someone who's not labeling their product, do you allow that person to bring that gear in and use it on your job where you're paying all the liability, all the workers' comp, you're doing all the training, and you have all the expense and all the risk as the owner because you're the ultimate one responsible? Do you allow non-labeled product on your job site? That's an individual kind of answer. I can't say that everybody should not allow it. Some people, maybe they know the splicer and the splicer has the brake tests, or they have a personal relationship and that's what they want to do. You can't talk them out of it. It's not illegal. Is it a good idea? Not really.
So it's I suppose what you're saying is it's accountability. If you're willing to put a label on your splice, then you're gonna have to. Well, then you are accountable if anything goes wrong. So you're gonna have to have insurance. You're gonna have to be able to stand behind your splices and the skill that you have in knowledge of ropes and that kind of stuff.
Well, think about it for a minute too, because what's on a label? A label should have minimum brake strength on it. So if you pick up something and it's less than 5,400 pounds, you shouldn't use it for life support right off the bat. If you have an aramid fiber, so let's say a beeline or an ocean poly hitch cord, that stuff is only supposed to be in the field for 3 years. It should have a born on date so you can figure out when it has to come out of service. Poly products, polyester cover, polyester core products have a 10-year service life. So they should have a date on them. And they should be taken out after 10 years. Now, I don't know a rigging rope that lasts 10 years unless it's not being used much. But still, after 10 years, when the fibers have lost their elasticity or they're dried out or cracked or brittle or sun damage from UV, it's prudent to get rid of that $250 rigging rope after 10 years. You've made enough money on it, right? But without a label, you don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
if somebody wanted to come and take your Fids and Fibres course, do you want to give us a bit of an insight into how the course runs and what they would expect to learn, and just the whole shebang?
Sure. There's basically two flavors of Fids and Fibres. One is the 5-day annual retreat, which is held in New Hampshire at my house. That 25 people get crammed into my little farmhouse. They bring their sleeping bags, their toothbrush, and a pillow, and they bring their favorite family recipe, a casserole, to share with everyone else. So basically, you can come for $500, which has been that price for 5 years now. $500, you get 5 days of training, and I teach from 8 a.m. till about 10 or 11 at night, all through the whole workshop. There's no food expense because we're sharing food, and there's no hotel expense because everyone's sleeping all around the house. Last year, Mark Powell and Matt Deere put up hammocks down in the basement by the wood stove and slept down there. But the house is kind of sectioned out, so there's good, safe, comfortable places to sleep. There's a bath and a half and a great big kitchen, and we're basically a big family for 5 days. One day, the first day, we go to a rope company on the East Coast, usually Yale, Sterling, or Teufelberger, and we do a factory tour, get to see the raw materials that rope is made from, spun into the strands, braided into ropes, and then packaged. Then we get to run the brake test machine. We get to talk to the splicing department. We get to talk to the engineers, ask as many questions as we want. And we usually get T-shirts and hitch cords and hats and stuff. And then we head back to the house, back to New Hampshire, and have dinner and start the splicing course that evening. And for the next 4 days, we splice from 8 a.m. till midnight, 4 days in a row. It's a commitment.
Yeah. Sounds like a good commitment, though.
Yeah. So that's one flavor, is the 5-day annual retreat. And that's kind of the one that gets the most photos and the most... You make about 18 products during that class, and you'll get 50 ISA CEUs and 50 TCIA CTSP credits, as well as 18 products, 25 pages of information in your packet, and personal instruction for 5 days, and all the networking and friends and love and kindness and laughter you can stand for 5 full days. The second Fids and Fibres type of workshop is a 2-day on-the-road workshop. I started trying to do those as 3 days, but it's difficult for arborists to get like a Friday and then Saturday, Sunday, or a Saturday, Sunday, and then a Monday.
Yeah.
So what I've done is I've created a splicing marathon, 2-day splicing marathon, Saturday and Sunday. We start at 8 a.m. and we go till midnight on Saturday. Start at 8 a.m. again and go till midnight on Sunday. So you get about 28 hours of splicing instruction, and the TCIA has granted us 20 CEUs for CTSP holders, and ISA has granted us 20 CEUs for ISA certified arborists.
That is a lot of CEUs.
It's That's ton of CEUs.
Crazy, man.
And I'm so grateful that those organizations feel like we're living up to their requirements to give that kind of value out. But in those courses, you'll splice about 10 or 11 products. They're very long days, and whoever hosts it normally will give us snacks and water, and then depends on how it all works out. If it's at a arborist supply shop, a lot of times the company will buy us pizza or salads or Mexican or something for the for dinner and that kind of thing. But sometimes we all just chip in $5 or $10 and get pizza delivered and take care of it that way. Let's see, what's the big difference between the two? It's really 2 days worth of instruction, and it's fast paced. There's a lot of information to go over. So we go over hollow braid, we go over 16 strand, and we go over double braid. And I try to get at least 2 or 3 repetitions of each one in, as well as teaching about fiber characteristics, heat characteristics, elongation, tenacity, coefficient of friction, that kind of stuff. We go over all that, and we go over the traditional, how traditional tools were used and created, and I give them lots of information about what tools used to be used in the past and what we use now and why. It's a ton of fun.
So there is a lot of information to get in there.
Yeah.
And do you feel like the people that you teach are able to take in most of that information, or do you think quite a lot of it gets lost because there is so much to take in?
I'd say a fair amount gets lost. I'd say that people who take a 2-day Fids and Fibres usually come back for 2 or 3. People who are really interested in splicing and want to know the details, they'll come back for 2 or 3 2-day workshops. So wherever I go, there's usually a few repeats.
Yeah.
But I'd say that literally 90% of all students that take a Fids and Fibres workshop don't splice again. Because I think they understand for the first time the attention to detail, the meticulous nature of splicing, the difficulty, and the time required to learn it and be proficient at it. And they realize that paying $25 for a splice or $35 for a hitch cord is actually a really good deal. When you can buy one that's labeled, that's done well, done correctly, and you understand what's going on inside, they look at rope in a different way. Like before it was rope.
Yeah.
Now you look at a splice after you've been through a Fids and Fibres, you're like feeling for the taper. You're looking at the brummels. You're looking to see how long the taper is and whether there's baggy spots in the eye. And you're more proficient with the tool that we all use every single day. Like for the first time your eyes are opened and you're like, wow, that's a really crappy splice. You know? Or they say, wow, that's a really good splice. Or they say, that splice, the whipping on that splice was perfect yesterday, and today the bars are popped off, which means that we overloaded that rope and the whipping has broken inside, meaning the splice has moved. I now know what that means, and I'm going to avert a failure and retire that rope. I get those phone calls all the time. Thank you so much. I learned so much. I DQ'd a piece of gear today because of what you taught me. Yeah. So that 90% that doesn't splice again still looks at rope in a different way.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the purpose of Fids and Fibres.
There's actually having mentioned that we both went to the Petzl symposium, and that what you just said there kind of just reminded me of it, is that there was a theme, because it came up a couple of times, of people saying you don't know what you don't know, and that's so true with the people before they came on the splicing course. And then, like you're saying, even if they have no intention of following through with their splicing because they realize how much time is involved to become proficient at it and how much work it is, and maybe that the $25 to pay for a splice is worth every penny of it because now they see what goes into doing it. But they actually have understood, they've learned about rope, and like you were saying, they've learned about how to feel if a splice is right, or if there's lumps and bumps there, or if the taper's too short. And going back to that saying of you don't know what you don't know, it's so true. And I mean, it's so true in arboriculture in general. Like the longer we're in it and the more experienced we are, like you realize how little you know and how much more there is to know, and you always meet people on a pretty much, well, it depends on where you are, but like a weekly basis, who can give you a little nugget of wisdom to take you to the next level.
Yeah, so I've been teaching splicing for 10 years, right? And never have I felt that I have the final word in it. I always have more to learn. So today I went to Samson and I met one of their premier splicers who does a lot of their brake testing. And he dropped a few little nuggets of wisdom on me that I was like, whoa, I never even thought about it in that direction. And sure enough, yeah, it makes total sense. So he just turned a switch for me. And so if I can do that for other people in any way, that's really what I'm shooting for.
It's those little nuggets of wisdom that, you know, when you hear somebody say something and it clicks for you, you're just like, oh my God, it just makes you feel so good, because you know that you're going to take that bit of wisdom and it's either going to make things easier for you, or you're going to be able to pass that knowledge on to somebody else, and it's just going to make people more efficient in whatever you're doing. And to the person that dropped that little bit of knowledge on you, maybe that's just part of their day-to-day basis, and that's what they do at work, and they didn't even realize how much of an impact that had on you. But that it's those little things that, you know, going back to the little Petzl workshop, out on the field trip, seeing Ryan Torcicola, I think that's his name.
Yeah, Torcicola. Yeah.
Just a really simple little thing he did that I actually posted on my social media of putting a pulley above his zigzag while he's pulling his rope up, and it kept his zigzag collapsed as he's pulling his rope up. And maybe because I hadn't been using a zigzag that much, or it's just one of those things that because like we can all pull our rope into a tree, a lot of us don't think about that one little trick that makes things easier, that, you know.
Well, you weren't alone, because when he did that, there was a collective from the crowd. They were like, wow, that was so simple.
Yeah.
Why didn't I think of that?
And these things, and I'm sure it's because Ryan is a competition climber, and there's all these kind of little tricks that a lot of them come from competition climbing, because everybody wants to get that little advantage, that little bit of efficiency, that little extra kind of bonus point scoring opportunities, so that they come out of all these things that actually are really useful in the real world, on a day-to-day basis. And that was just one of the things that
so when I get those little nuggets like I did today, there's just little bomb that drops, what I realize is that I wasn't ready to hear that prior. Like, I needed to learn to get to a level where it made sense for the first time. And so I think subconsciously, with a Fids and Fibres workshop, with how many hours I put into every workshop, what I do is I try to create a space. Even though there's a lot of information coming, I go back and repeat, and I try to give a safe space for people to let those little clicks happen, let those lights turn on. And as I will look around the room, I see it in every workshop. Someone will look at me quizzically, like Winnie the Pooh, like, what's that? And then a little while later, all of a sudden, the eyes go clear, and there's a smile, and it's like, I got it. And I point at them, and I say, I don't even say anything. I just point and look, and I go, and I nod, and they nod back, and we know we're on the same page. And it's a beautiful moment. And it happens every class. When they're ready to hear it, they hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can just see the light bulb flick on.
Yeah.
So do you stay in contact with a lot of the people that come to your courses?
I try to. I've been doing this 10 years. I teach about 200 students a year, so that's about 2,000 students have gone through a Fids and Fibres now. And I offer the same thing to every class. If you're doing a splice and you're stuck, or if you have a question about a rope or a splice or an instruction or a tool or anything, here's my cell phone number, call me. And so my phone buzzes and dings and whirs, because there's people in every time zone all around the world.
Yeah.
And I get little questions all the time, from Bulgaria, from England, from Ontario, from the Pacific Northwest, from Australia, all hours of the day and night. People are just saying hello, checking in, saying thank you, or asking a question. I can't remember everybody's name. There's so many, and I don't see them often enough, but I love hearing from them. Yeah, totally. I try to.
Yeah. I remember while we were at the Pretzel Symposium, we had a good chat about, and you explained about this project that you kind of got in the works a little bit, called the Growth Ring. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and explain what your idea behind it is and where you're hoping to take it?
So yeah, I'd love to talk about that. Actually, it's a real passion of mine. For the past, I think I've been on Facebook about 7 or 8 years. I've run a page on Facebook called Fallen Tree Workers, and I post accidents and injuries, fatalities, close calls. Also, like when Ricardo Vasquez cut his lanyard last week or 2 weeks ago, I posted that when there was a nice discussion about paying attention and focus. And then, of course, that week, 3 more people cut their lanyards and posted it on social media, but that's okay. We're working on it. But that page is different than a lot of the pages that you'll see an accident or an injury on, because when someone posts something stupid that someone did and they get hurt or killed, the first comment on the internet is always, what a effing asshole, or what an idiot, or whatever. And people don't realize that the person that got hurt or killed, their family is also on social media. And when they read something like that, it cuts them to their core because they've just lost someone, or their relationship with someone, like let's say it's your husband or your son, is suddenly in a wheelchair or recovering for 10 months or a year trying to get back on his feet, or dead. The last thing they need to read is that. They need to hear something positive. So for instance, there was a fellow that was climbing in Chicago area about 6 months ago, got into the high tension wires, limb indirect contact, got jammed up and ended up, his body was on fire. He was dead, body on fire, hanging in the tree. You can imagine the comments about that. Everything from attempts at humor to ways of deflecting the fact that, like someone who makes a comment about that guy, sometimes they were in a tree recently right next to high tension power lines, and they don't want to admit that they were at risk. They want to think that they're immune and they're, Superman. So when it happens to someone and they actually see it, the first thing they do is deflect it by saying, that guy's an idiot, right? So that's a protection mechanism that we as climbers who risk that fate have. But the family, when I posted it, I posted rest in peace. I said, we lost a brother. The family actually contacted me and said, can you please take that picture down for us? It's too painful to see it. And so I took the picture down, and then the family wrote me and said, we took a look at your page and the way that you moderate it, and we really want to say thank you for caring for the people that get hurt and die, and our brother. And so we had a back and forth conversation about it a little bit, and I was able to give my condolences and really kind of reach out to them because of it. Being in the industry 20 years now, I've seen a lot of people get hurt, people that I'm close to. I've seen people get hurt multiple times, and I've seen people die, and I've seen people that I know die, and people that are close to people that I know die. What I tend to do is I tend to look at what's the root cause of a problem. When I first came in the industry, TCIA was all about publishing the calendar. Oh, we have 125 fatalities a year and so many serious injuries per year. The next year it was the same conversation. The next year is the same conversation. Next year is the same conversation. ISA says, well, we'll send Dr. John Ball out and tell us all about the accidents and injuries. We'll show the pictures at TCIA. And it's the same damn presentation every year. Dr. John Ball, bless his soul, does great statistic work. He's an EMT. He's a professor. Great first responder. He thinks a lot about this stuff. I don't want him to have a job. I want him out of work. I don't think that we need to see this stuff every year. I don't think it has to happen. But the traditional methods of trying to fix it are not working. And so maybe I'm pie in the sky. Maybe I'm full of horse manure. But I think that if we can empower people and enlighten people and have them make better decisions, because it's the decision to put something in motion that causes the problem. It's the decision to either put your body in motion or a piece of wood in motion that causes the problem. I think if we have better decisions at the point of the start of motion, then a lot of this goes away. So for instance, if you're a climber and you're chunking down a spar or blowing a top out, you have a lot to think about. You have your ground people to think about. Is everybody looking? Is everybody in place? Is everybody in a safe location? Is the rigging rope tied around, or is the rigging guy standing in a pile of rope? You have to look at where his feet are and how he piled the rope way out in front of him so he can't get wrapped up in it. Because we just recently had somebody who got pulled into a fallen tree because the rope got snagged around his legs, and he got 2 broken legs and multiple ribs and head injury and everything. Like, We can't allow that. So as a climber, you have to make the decision, is that guy ready? There's no rush. And you need to care for that person, love that person enough to make sure that they're square. And if they're arguing with you about whether it's set up right or not, then you don't do it until it's right. If you have to come down out of the tree and tell your boss that this person you can't work with, fine. But don't just pull the trigger because you're pissed off because you can't communicate to that guy. Something's failing. And as that climber in the tree, you obviously have to worry about your rigging points. Are they appropriate? Your rigging slings, are they in good shape? Have they been inspected? Your rigging hardware, is that stuff square? Is it attached properly? When's the last time? I mean, I think we've all probably not screwed in something that should have been screwed in and found out later, or it was loose when we touched it because we didn't tighten it enough. Is my climbing system and my lanyard in the appropriate location before I put the saw in the tree? Is my notch configured appropriately before I hit the back cut and actually make things move? Have I fully inspected the entire tree from the root plate all the way up? These are all decisions. And what happens is we get complacent and we don't take responsibility for those things. A climber gets shook in a tree and they blame the ground guy for not letting it run. Well, it's really the climber's fault because the climber didn't inspect the entire setup because they're responsible for all of it. If there's too many wraps, it's the climber's fault. It's not the ground guy's fault. The communication should be good enough these days with Cena headsets and good visual communication. And here we are, 2019. We all know how to speak. We all know what clear, crisp, clean communication is. There's no reason not to practice it at work where it's life or death. That's the worst place to not practice it. So getting the climbers and the ground guys to accept responsibility for these moments of decision is where it's at for me. Arbormaster, Nats, Canadian, ACRT, and what's Dwayne's company?
Arbcan.
Arbcan,
yeah,
right.
Arbcan.
Those guys are wonderful at teaching how to cut a notch, how to rig a piece, how to do a crane pick, how to wrap a porter wrap. They're great at that stuff. I don't want to play in that arena. What I want to do is I want to do arborist personal development, where taking responsibility, having integrity, having good communication, actually being able to say, I love my crew member. I love you enough as my ground guy to make sure that you are not in harm's way. And if you're being obstinate about how we're doing stuff, then I love you enough to get out of the tree and talk with you and fix it and make that relationship better. If I can't make that relationship better, then I need to ask for a new ground guy. But to have the courage to stop production until it's safe is what has to happen, in my opinion. Because production is a myth. If you are sent out to do this job day after day after day, and they're constantly pushing more and more and more work at you, and you're trying to play to your ego, see what I can do, I'm the best climber, I'm the fastest climber, I'm the most productive climber, I'm a production climber, all this type of talk is really just playing to your ego. Because you can do all that work and take all that risk, the company's making all the money. You're not getting a bump in your paycheck to do that. And even if you were, how much is enough to justify you getting hurt or killed on the last cut of the day or the last tree of the day because you're doing quote unquote production? And that's what the growth ring is about. As a tree puts on growth rings every year of experience, every season, every cycle of nutrients, so do we. So every person we come in contact with, we put on a little bit of a growth ring. Or we should surround ourselves with people who make us better instead of people that tear us down. And when we do, we put on a growth ring. So when I work around Martin Penrose, I learned something. When I work around you, even our conversations earlier today, I've changed a little bit because of that. I put on a growth ring. When I talk to the guys at Samson today, I learned something and I put on a growth ring. I'm a little more professional this afternoon than I was this morning, right? Tom Dunlap is famous for saying, you meet a guy and you offer him some advice, and he says, "Don't tell me how to do my job. I've been doing this for 20 years." And Tom Dunlap is famous for saying, 20 years of the same year is not 20 years of experience. That's 1 year, 20 times, right? And so that guy hasn't put on a growth ring. In truth, he's still a sapling. He's still playing the same fiddle that he was given when he was a sapling, and he's playing that one card over and over and over again. He's not putting on true maturity, true introspection, true caring, true compassion, true understanding, true curiosity, not following through. And that's what I want to promote in arboriculture. I want to reach out to the crew leaders and allow them to be mentors. Be the mentor that you wish you had. Mm-hmm. So that takes some introspection.
Yeah.
When you ask that question, who was your mentor? Was he a good mentor or a bad mentor? How would you be the mentor you wish you had?
Yeah.
And that's really the core of the growth ring, is asking that question and getting an answer back, a multi-layered answer.
I love that question, because if you actually just sit back for a second, and if you're the person that has at some point been a crew leader, or you've just you've taught somebody how to climb or how to splice, or you've just been a bit of a role model for somebody, that question makes so much sense, because when you mentioned that question to me at Petzl, you instantly go back and think about who taught you to climb, who got you into the industry, or who gave you your first job and what they taught you, and then the next company you worked for, and if you worked with somebody who had more or different experience than the first guy and what they taught you, and then you think about when you get a guy who's maybe an apprentice, or somebody who's never done it before, somebody who maybe not interested, or somebody that is really interested, and how you go about teaching them. And I find it's not even about, when I think about how I would teach somebody, or who I've taught in the past, I think it's not about the actual information that you're teaching them, as much as it is about how you deliver it, and how you figure out each person and how they take on information, and their personality, and how you can kind of tap into that individual, and what worked for you as an individual. And yeah, like we were saying before about nuggets of wisdom, which kind of real nuggets that you want to drop at certain points, so that it keeps them, really wanting to hear more, and wanting them to come back to work the next day because they're so excited because they've learned this new technique that they're going to implement. And the question, or the statement about being the mentor you wish you'd had, I think that's fantastic for anybody who's ever thought or is thinking about training somebody.
Yeah. So in the growth ring, one of the things that we talk about is there's a natural progression. When you learn something new, you're a novice. A novice doesn't know what they don't know. And after you're a novice for a little while and you decide you're going to stick with something, then you become an apprentice. And this is a traditional role. Like if you were a blacksmith or a splicer or a farmer or anything, you had an apprentice time. A jeweler, you'd work as an apprentice, right? And then you would apprentice underneath a master, someone who had mastered the craft and would take you on as an apprentice. And then after the master has lived so long and they're no longer viable in the workforce, then they become a sage. And then they think more about the philosophy of what it is we do. And they have more advice and less tactical, right? So novice, apprentice, master, sage. Now, that's something that's survived for, 2,000, 3,000 years, maybe longer. But now in the internet age, when everything's so fast and the volume is cranked up on everything and our attention spans are being divided by the phone and by video lengths and by little snippets of ads that are slipped into other little snippets of ads, we're losing the ability to be an apprentice. No one wants to be an apprentice because I can watch a YouTube video and I can skip that step and I can be just like August.
Yeah.
Right? If I watch a couple of August videos, I can be just like August. Well, it's not true in tree work because there's so many variables of the saw, how it's filed, how it's running, while the air filter, what the fuel is, what type of wood is it? Is it a pine? Is it a beech? Is it an oak? Is it cracked? Is it lightning damaged? Is it fire scarred? There's a million variables in every piece of it. And you can't just get that overnight, and you can't get it from a YouTube video. So, and I'm not talking down towards millennials, but millennials have grown up in a society where you can watch a video and then get through it.
Yeah.
But in tree work, we need to go back to the old ways. We need to bring a novice on. And while the novice is a novice, before they're an apprentice, we need to care for them. We need to shepherd over them. I don't know if you remember, a couple of years ago, there was a story about a 17-year-old that went through a chipper on his first day. It was his uncle's company. His mom and the uncle were brother and sister, and he was the nephew. And she said, will you take him on for the summer? And he brought him in. And the very first day he went through the chipper. So he's a novice.
Oh, man.
And somehow no one was watching him. No one explained where to be, how to be, what to do. And he went through the chipper. So we didn't protect that novice. It wasn't his fault because he doesn't know what he doesn't know. He did the best that he could. He was trying to probably please somebody by getting a piece of wood through the chipper. So he was doing what he thought was the right thing. No one would dive through a chipper on purpose, right? So he's trying to work, and he's like, oh, here's a running chipper. There's a piece of wood. I'll put it in. I'll be a hero. And now he's gone. So the failure was at the mentoring level. And I'm not trying to throw the uncle under the bus. I think as an industry, we're doing that. We're not paying attention to the novice. And too many people are getting hurt on their first day. Or they're not getting instruction on their first day. They're not getting encouragement and full explanation of what's going on and how to survive when you're a novice.
And why? So in an industry that has so many potential risks and hazards, why do you think people aren't taking the time to even show people the basics? And
well,
would you say that's something that is really, it's just our industry? It's like,
no, I think it's a societal pressure. Everyone's going so fast. Production is the myth that we're all trying to attain, right? We got to get this work done. Oh, we got a new guy. Oh, it doesn't matter. We got to get his work done, right? And then the other thing I think is how many guys have you trained? How many new guys have you trained that haven't come back on the second day? So you don't value that person. You're like, yeah, he showed up. We'll see if he shows up on the second day. You're not going to spend a lot of time. You're not going to invest in him. You're not going to give him, like on my crews, they get 3 days of training before they're allowed on a job site. They get 3 full days of training before they're even allowed on a customer job. So they learn chipper maintenance, like how to grease it. They walk around it, get familiar with all the pieces. They learn their PPE, how to put their hard hat on properly, how to secure it, how to put their glasses on, where to put their glasses when they take the hat off. They know where the first aid kit is. They know which chainsaws are in there and which ones, what their names are. They know where the rigging ropes are. They know where the climbing stuff is. They know where the rakes are. And how to put the rakes away, like day after day after day until they're 3 days in, and they know where to be, where to stand, what to wear, and all that stuff. They're not even allowed on a job site till after the 3rd day. And now that's because I run the company. I can make that decision. I lose money on that because I spend 3 days training somebody who may not show up on the 4th day. Oh, this is too hard. Now what happens is guys show up and maybe they're drunk, they're high, they're unreliable, they don't have a license, and we discount them and then they don't show up. We're not putting enough investment in them on the very first day to get them to show up on the 2nd day. So that's the novice end of things. Now in the apprentice thing, there's another special set of problems under apprentice, because with the YouTube generation, and I'm not talking about the people, I'm just talking about the technology, right? The YouTube world that we live in. People say, well, I watched a video on how to rig down a tree or how to cut a tree, and now I know how to do it. So no one wants to be an apprentice. And guys or girls, no one likes to be told what to do. No one likes to be under someone, because our society has said, you're an individual, you're the manly man, you're out there, you're the alpha, don't be stuck learning under somebody. But we've lost that pride. So when I say who were my mentors, Tom Dunlap was my mentor on Tree Buzz. He taught me a lot of stuff, how to double check things. And I'm proud to say that Tom Dunlap was there for me. When I asked him questions, he always answered. Michael Taine, which a lot of people may not know these days, but a phenomenal arborist, climber, contract climber, first responder, nurse. He's the Mark Twain of arboriculture. He can tell stories that'll spin your head around. He taught me patience. He taught me splicing. He taught me the seriousness of what we do and how to be serious and be humorous at the same time. Tom Wilkins, another one of my mentors, 6'6", 40 years in the business, taught me how to have a relationship with trees. How to pay attention to their growth patterns, how to look at them, how to feel them, how to actually be spiritual about trees. So I had these wonderful mentors, and I'm so proud of them. I would not want to be where I am today without them. Melissa Levangie, another one of my amazing mentors. Melissa's taught me more than I can say about tree work, about relating to people, about customers, about sensitivity, about caring for my crew and caring for my clients and caring for their trees. Like, where would I be without her? I don't know. I don't really want to think about it. But people who are coming up now, the culture is different. What we're missing is the masters that stepping into the mentorship role to bring these people along and someone to be proud of. Because now with the internet age, you put up a couple good videos and everyone kind of is like, oh, very cool. And then you do a crappy video and like, oh, he's so yesterday's news. No one's willing to stick it through.
Yeah.
What's that fella's name from Australia? Graham McMahon.
Yep. Yes.
So Graham's been at this for 30-something years. You've probably watched the Air Terhune takedowns on YouTube. Yep. Graham is a mentor to me, even though I've never met him in person. I followed his career, and I know that I don't want to do any of the shit he does. Right? But he's always there. And it's not like Graham is good one day and Graham's bad another day. Same thing with Reg Coates, right? Reg Coates, as acerbic as he can be, as humorous as he can be, he's just got something that sticks with you for a long, long time. I'm happy to say that Reg has really affected me.
Yeah.
Now, what I want to do is I want to get to the mentors, the masters in this group, because now I'm 56 years old. I'm surrounded by guys who are in their late 40s, 50s, and 60s, who are fabulous tree workers, fabulous climbers, fabulous businessmen. And I want to reach out to them and have them step into their role fully as mentors, and then drag these. I don't want them to drag them. I want them to embrace them, these apprentices. And I want the apprentices to start hearing people talk about apprenticeship as something to be proud of.
Yeah. Yeah. If you, like you were saying, if you think back to the way people were, and if I think back to like my dad and his friends, and they speak with a lot of pride about being an apprentice and who they served their apprenticeship under and that kind of thing. And you're so right. And it's not anybody's fault. It's just society and the way it's gone today, with every bit of information seemingly at our fingertips, even which it is in one respect, but it's also like it's completely false, really, because in our industry you don't just need knowledge, theory. You need experience, and you can only get experience, and you can only learn to do certain things by being taught and being mentored. Because working with trees, like every single job you ever go to is different in some way, shape or form. The way that the tree might react, the way that the density of the wood. You might be rigging a branch one day, and then the day after you're rigging another branch, and as an apprentice they might look like two very similar sized branches that very similar location in somebody's garden, but to an experienced person the situation is completely different, and it needs to be approached differently, and that's something that you'll never be able to learn from the internet. And what happens, like watching videos on the internet, reading articles or looking at pictures, you might learn how, or you might be watching how to learn a specific technique, but knowing from myself making a video, you can, like, it's hard enough to explain everything you need to explain about doing even a simple technique, let alone being able to then open people's eyes and say, on the broader scale of things that I can't get into this video, you need to think about wood type, you need to think about weather conditions, you need to think about ground conditions, all, like, everything that you'd never even think of saying. So yeah, you're never going to be able to, well, I mean, I don't know if I can say never. Like, some people will probably grow up learning everything from the internet, and some people might make a career out of it, having never gone and been trained properly. But
well, when I teach chainsaw safety courses, one of the things I use as an example is, if you're cutting into a decayed tree and you've chosen a place where you think you have good hinge wood, and you're kind of aiming for an apex that's still in good hinge wood, as your saw's dropping in your first cut, there's no way a video will ever capture the feeling that the wood is going punky. That's a feeling. It's a instinct. It's a sensation. It's something that only comes with experience.
Yeah.
Right? And we'll never capture that. We'll never be able to explain that to someone, how a saw feels different when the wood, where you think you've got a good hinge wood, and then it's going soft, so you know to stop and let off, and then alter your plans so that you have enough hinge wood left. I've taught that 100 times through Cena headsets.
Yeah.
There's no way a video is ever going to capture it, and it takes shutting off the saw, taking the wedge out, feeling the wood with your finger, or hitting it with a screwdriver to show the person where it's changing and how it changed. And then you have to go back and say, did you feel it? No, I didn't feel it. The saw was vibrating. It was loud. I didn't. And then I get a call 6 months, a year later. Hey, I cut a tree today and I felt what you talked about. That's how long it takes. That's an apprenticeship, and mentoring someone from a distance that way, they finally get it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a scary thought. I mean, I have a lot of opinions about the internet and how it is affecting, and the benefit that it's done for the industry. But it's like everything in the world, where where there's a positive, there's a negative. Where there's an action, there must be a reaction, kind of thing. And it's like there's so much positive that comes from, you know, YouTube and social media, and how quickly ideas can spread on, like, across the internet, across the world. Somebody has a great idea, and, you know, the next day they make a little video sharing their idea, or maybe they've had an idea but they know it could be better but they can't figure it out, so they ask, you know, other people what they think, and great techniques have come and have come on so quickly from the presence of the internet and social media. But on the opposite end of that is a very scary thought of people, like you were saying, you know, apprentices or even homeowners that think they want to tackle their own trees, and it's terrifying.
It sure is.
But it's like there is no way. There's no way to stop it. There's no way to police anything, because everybody has a platform if they want one. And like we were saying before, you don't know what you don't know. So somebody could have the best intention and make a video and either just be showing what they're doing at work, or even trying to show others what they're doing, and they think that they're might be helping people, or they just, you know, they want to share what they're doing at work on it because they think it's cool, and with the best intention, 2 years down the line they might be like, oh god, that was actually like the complete opposite thing of what I should have been doing. But and you don't know how many people are going to be influenced by that, because to you it's just putting a video online, but to, you know, to the person who might click on it and have just been thinking about starting in arboriculture, like going to college, or, you know, being sat at home thinking I don't have a job, and they click on it and then think, oh, that's cool, and it's the first kind of imprint on the brain what you've been doing. Like there's so much to think about that as humans we're not. I don't think we're ready for social media and how quickly you can influence people nowadays.
I don't think we quite understand the platform as it's being built. People don't realize that some of this video content is going to be out there well past their death, right?
Yeah. So
people like Treesus Bartleby, my friend Dakota. So I've had a couple conversations with Dakota about, hey man, maybe it's time in your life to start doing a little more serious videos instead of the silly stuff. And Dakota's like, yeah, well, you know, I'm having fun doing this now and stuff. And I totally respect that. But there's going to come a point as I watch him, because I'm much older than he is, as I watch him mature, there'll come a day when he's doing exactly what you say. Maybe it's time to start changing. And that's what happened with that fella from down south. Super cheap tree work. He used to do the funny videos. But he went from doing the funny videos to trying to be a serious safety practitioner. And he found that some of those funny videos were getting thousands and thousands and thousands of views, and the safety ones weren't. And so it's kind of a balancing act as to what you're trying to get out of it and how mature you are at the moment you do it.
Yeah. It's ultimately, if you have an agenda and what it is, and I suppose if your friend Treesus,
Treesus,
if he's just having a laugh and he enjoys doing it, then keep on doing it.
Have at it. He's good at what he does. Yeah. But I know that as he matures, he's going to think about it, and I'm looking forward to that conversation when it happens. Yeah. You know, I want to be there to support him, because changing your dynamic, changing your personality online can be an interesting thing, right?
A strange switch.
Yeah, and so to go back to the novice, apprentice, master, sage thing, where the growth ring is really pointed is, I think, really at the masters. Because like you were saying earlier, you might be really good at doing something, but you're not very good at teaching it. So you might not have the communication skills to teach it, or you might not think you do, so therefore you don't. So you never speak up when you have the opportunity. So I'd like to empower the masters of our industry to stand up and become mentors, because I think that's a really huge untapped resource that is out there working every day, that we can, if we can get them to step into their power, to step into their confidence, to step into their role as mentors, that will go a long way towards fixing some of the accidents and injuries and fatalities that we have. And then, of course, the sages, the people who are now no longer doing the work but have philosophical roles to play, like Jerry Baranek, for instance. Like, how can you not respect everything that Jerry's done as a sage, giving him a platform and giving him deference to say, what from the past is still valuable in these days, and how can he mentor the mentors for our apprentices? And I think tying that all together from novice cradle to grave is an important thing, because arboriculture is really all about history. I forget who said it in physics. It said, if I've learned anything or if I've contributed anything, it's because I stand on the shoulders of giants. And that's how I feel every single day. I think about where I've come from. Rich Hattier doesn't even have any concept of how much he's impacted my life. Michael Taine doesn't either. Like, when I thank them for it, they slough it off as like, oh, I was just doing what I do, you know.
Yeah, because to them, it was just them, doing what they do and teaching a class that they've taught 100 times before, and to you as like the person that's getting all this information and seeing how they work, and you're just absorbing everything, whereas to them there was probably another 10 people in the room, or
we had 30 people or 40 people, and I was just one of the faces. There's only one of them, and there's hundreds of us.
And so no matter how much you expressed to them how much it meant 10 years ago when you learnt from them, they will never be able to. Well, the only way that they'll be able to understand that is if they've had somebody else that they have looked up to and that they learnt from, and that they thank sincerely in the same way, then they will understand. But when and I'm sure the same thing happens with you when somebody says to you, oh, thank you so much, like that course you did 6 years ago and the information that you gave me, and then the email that you replied to answering my questions, it just meant so much, and I've learned so much from that whole experience. You're probably the same. You probably take the gratitude, but you can't see exactly what that person is feeling.
Yeah, I can't feel it at the level they feel it, but I do my best to answer everything, because you never know what piece of encouragement is going to change someone's life. And right in this moment, I remember there was a student that I had in Denver. We called him Taco, and he ended up committing suicide a while back. And it shook me so hard that I lost a student, because he was one of these people that you meet in the class, and he had this beautiful electric smile, brilliant smile, great sense of humor, just a complete lovable human being. And when I heard I lost him, when I found out that it happened, I couldn't shake it for weeks. And so I talked to some of the guys in the Denver area about it and learned a little more. And I always wonder if there was something that I could have said, or was there a reach? Like, everything's a waterfall, right? There's so many messages that come in. Did I get to all of them? Did he reach out? So as a result of that, I try to answer everything, because you never know when someone's having a tough time, whether it's in their career, they're fighting with their boss, or they're actually thinking about bigger things. So I can't feel it, but I try to reach back. For sure.
Yeah. Well, I really hope that this growth ring kind of takes the course that you're hoping it will take, because it sounds like sounds like you've put a lot of thought and effort into just the whole concept of the idea, and to be able to implement something like that, or to be able to just give out the information in hope that people can take that information and implement it in their own lives, and in their own workplace, and because it's more, by the sounds of it, it's more just of how people, the approach people take, and how they're concentrating on development of their own career, and as well as the people that work around them or that work for them. It's not about techniques in arboriculture as we all know and get trained. It's not about that. It's about mindset and personal development and those kind of things.
So a little bit more insight into the growth ring is that there's going to be a book that comes out right now it has 106 chapters. It'll probably go up a little bit, but each chapter is a small vignette of some area of personal development. And so when you read through the book, it'll look a lot like the TCIA tailgate safety program, where you could pick a chapter every day and use it as a tailgate safety. So if you have a crew leader that reads well and can understand concepts pretty well, they could read through that and figure out a way that it applies to their group and use that as their idea for the day. If that topic is so powerful to the company that they say, oh, we want a trainer to train on this for a half a day, they could pick a couple chapters, call me up and say, we'd like you to come and teach on these 2 or 3 or 4 chapters, and I can break it down and do that kind of thing. But the power of the growth ring is going to be this, is I've got arborists all over the United States and some in Europe who want to be a part of the growth ring trainer system. So when I find someone who is super interested in a topic, one of those 106 chapters, and I get a request for that, I can say I have Chris Lucas, or I have Chip Hildreth, or I have so-and-so that would like to go out and do that training. And Chris or Chip or whoever will have talked with me at length about that, shown to me that they understand it and want to present that because it means so much to them. And now if someone listening to this is like, wow, I'd love to become a trainer on that because I'm at that point in my career and I want to do that, they can contact me and go over the list and we can talk it through, and I basically a train the trainer type thing. So now there's an army of people out there who are invested in this topic that can go out and teach. So it'll be involving all those mentors that we talked about earlier, all those masters, not just asking them to do it on their own every single day, but to actually be a part of the growth ring program.
That sounds awesome. That sounds so good to just get people from all over the world that are really kind of standing behind the idea of it all, and the fact that they're passionate enough to want to put themselves forward to help teach certain parts of this program that you're putting together. And it sounds incredible. And it's people who understand that whole mentorship, and they see how valuable that is. And like you were saying before, this is just a different approach to trying to make the industry safer. Like, because you were saying that the TCI, they're showing the statistics every year, and they're putting out the same training all the time, and obviously training improves over time, but it's very much the same program that they're trying to push, and trying to push training, but it's reaching people in to kind of change your mindset.
Exactly. So you take someone, let's say my friend Keith Pancake that works for ACRT, he had an accident and he ended up losing his arm because of it. Now Keith has a special insight into decision making and the ramifications of it and what he would do differently. And he can tell a story because he has a prosthetic arm, he can tell a story that has way more impact than I can.
Yeah.
And I have other friends who've been hurt who talk about their decision making and everything that led up to that accident in a way that I can't approach. And so instead of training myself to tell their story, I'm going to let them tell their story. Right.
Yeah.
Give them a platform and give them the training and the encouragement and the coaching to be able to stand up in front of a group and tell that story in a way that impacts. So,
yeah. And hopefully prevent other people becoming that person to tell that story to the next generation. Hopefully,
exactly.
Yeah, them hearing a story from somebody who's shared their horrific experience can prevent that, and that kind of comes to the point whenever I talk about safety, or I give a presentation on chainsaw safety in the canopy and those kind of things that I feel really passionate about. And I always say to people, because the inevitably there's some people who are kind of who are open to listening and to want to hear my points of view on using chainsaws in a safe manner, as I would say, and there's some people who are just kind of stubborn and see it as lost in production, and they need to get work done, and so they have to use chainsaws that, how I would say, is not unsafely, and certain people are just stuck in that mindset, and they're just not willing to open up their mind, and I just, one of the only things that I feel like I can kind of try and change their mind is to say, like, nobody, or I can't even articulate what I'm saying now, but nobody thinks they're gonna cut their leg off, or thinks they're gonna kill themselves, or thinks they're gonna cut themselves out of a tree, or thinks they're gonna drop a log on somebody, or nobody. They always think, oh, that might happen to somebody else because they work dangerously, but it's not happened to me yet, therefore it won't happen to me. But once you've cut your arm off, it's too late, and to say, oh, well, that does happen to me because it's happened once before. Yeah. And
we have the same thing in the NASCAR racing circuit, because NASCAR in the past was so dangerous that when a driver died, they would get together at the chapel and talk about it. But the drivers had this very special way of denying that it could possibly happen to them.
Yeah.
And that's what I think we have, right? I think that's what you're describing. Is
definitely.
That,
yeah.
You look at the chainsaw injury chart, and the whole left arm is red with dots of statistics that people have cut their left arm with a chainsaw. Well, there's a reason for that. It's because they're one-handing with their palm and their trigger finger on the throttle on the right hand of a two-handed saw. And that's why it's happening. But no one wants to admit that's why it's happening.
Do you know what's funny about... So I know the graphic that you're talking about, and I was giving a presentation, one of the last ones I gave, and somebody said to me, oh yeah, but don't you know that's an old graphic and it includes a lot of homeowners? And I said, even if that is true what you're saying, and it does include homeowners, it's still all on the left arm that people are cutting themselves. So it just because it's, you might say some of the people in that have been put into that graphic are homeowners, some who are arborists, some who are gardeners without insurance, whatever. It's still showing that everybody's cutting the left arm, and why not the right arm? And there's only one explanation for that.
Right. And if we change that graphic a little bit and had two of them, one for left-handed injuries with tail-handled saws, and one for left-handed injuries with top-handled saws, all of them would be on top-handled saws. There wouldn't be any for tail-handled saws because everyone runs those with two hands. Well, 99.9% of us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's it opens up a whole can of worms, that one. But
well, it's human nature to be stubborn, to resist change of what you were taught.
But I mean, it's the hardest thing where I find in trying to give a presentation to change people's way of working. It's going to take a really special approach and a certain dialogue and a certain delivery to be able to change people's opinions. And I don't feel like I've had enough experience in presenting this topic to have kind of picked up on that yet, because it's something that I feel really passionate about and something that I will continue to give presentations on, but it's trying to find the right kind of recipe to kind of bring everything together to make it hit home with people that aren't very open to taking that information in. I never want it to turn into an argument in the presentation between people who were listening or between myself. I never want to, start pointing fingers at people. I just want everybody to have a conversation about why they do it and try and slowly explain that there's a different way, and that like we were talking earlier, I think before we even started the podcast, about this mindset of production and production in each individual person's mind seems so important, but in the grand scheme of things, if you're not just looking at it on a daily or an hourly or a minute by minute basis, it doesn't really matter, because you'll get the job done, and so you either get the job done safely or you'll get the job done by putting yourself at risk, and you may be fine for years and years, or you maybe one day putting yourself in that same risk that you've put yourself in over and over and over again, and one day it's going to bite you and catch up with you, and are all those previous years of getting things done as fast as you can worth putting yourself at risk and worth.
Yeah, we talked about that, actually. We talked about what is actually driving your need to be a quote-unquote production climber. What does that mean to you? And then a lot of times it's your ego, because there's a pecking order in tree work, right? Who's the best, who's the fastest, who's the most alpha, right? So ego's a tricky thing. Like, you can't just say, oh, you're letting your ego run you, because then someone will get their back up.
Yeah, that's negative.
Yeah,
and people take offense to that. Yeah.
But then at the same time, after you've been hurt and you can no longer do the work that you were doing, and you become humble, and then you look back, you can say, wow, I was letting my ego run me. I could still be doing that work and providing for my family if I had been a little less prideful in that moment, if I had been a little more open in that moment. Now, that piece of enlightenment, sometimes it can only come after an injury, but there are people who are open enough to look at that structure, that model, and go, if I let my ego run me all the time, I could suffer that, and then I'll be humble later. Or I could be humble now and continue to do what I'm doing for a much longer period of time. Like picking up that huge log and carrying it to the front yard. We only do that for ego.
Yeah.
We got a dolly, we got a mini skid, we could cut it in half, we could do all kinds of things, but we do it all the time. Throw that huge chunk on there. Ego shows up in all kinds of places. You just got to start looking for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right, I reckon we should wrap this up, Mark.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for coming over and joining me. It was awesome that you were staying around for a couple of weeks after the New Green splicing workshop. So
I'm so grateful
yeah,
to be here.
I'm glad that we could do this, because obviously we live at opposite sides of the continent, so it's very rare. But yeah, it was awesome to have this conversation with you, and hopefully people will take things away from it. And awesome to talk to you before we even started, and just to hear more about what you do. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Glad to be here, man.
Thanks, Mark.
All right.
Cheers. Thank you very much for listening to the Climbing Arborist podcast. Thank you very much to Mark. I can't say thank you enough for him coming and doing this podcast with me. That was an absolutely fantastic conversation. I just want to thank our sponsors again for sponsoring the podcast. So it's Wesper Tree Equipment. You can go and do your shopping over at wesper.com and use the promo code at checkout, CA-shirt, to get yourself a free SRS Wesper tree climbing t-shirt with every order. And also really big thank you to Jobber Software. That's Jobber for sponsoring the website. Getjobber.com is the website, and it's a business management software, and it works really well for tree care companies. And you can use the promo code getjobber.com/IM/climbing-arborist, and with that promo code, or through signing up through that web page, you will get 20% off your first 6 months subscription to Jobber. Thanks again, and really hope you enjoyed the podcast, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.